Hello.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello, friends. Um,
we
we
made
are
Ozymandias.
we're the team behind this game. It's nothing more than a pretty loading screen.
Yeah, so I guess you should probably jump right in.
Yeah,
Let's get
alright,
going. So we have
click play.
Ollie playing the game, and we have the lovely developers here for some developer commentary. So I guess the
So
first,
just as a quick rundown of sort of the general premise of this game, it started from us asking the question, what would it actually be like to live in and run a fantasy town that you see in a lot of like RPGs and video games? So your classic like your Skyrim's Whiterun, or your like the town from Diablo, stuff like that. Uh, and taking it from the perspective of like if an entire economy is based around this idea that like adventurers fund and are needed for pretty much every aspect of everyday life. What would that be like? And that's basically kind of what we've tried to do with this game through the idea of a city builder.
Yeah. We worked on the aesthetics quite a lot, as you can see. Very pretty game. Also, let me know if it's too loud and I can turn things down.
yeah, don't worry, I can change things on the fly if it's too loud. Right now, it's just fine. All
I
right.
still don't actually know. I'm probably the one in the group that's played the game the least. That's why I volunteered to play it.
Yeah, we wanted to get it from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know all the elite tactics and everything, all of the strategies yet.
Yeah, because we got progress. I don't think I've ever reached any of. Actually, no. Yeah, I haven't. All right. I built a building. Next turn.
So one of the concepts of this game is that we wanted to do a city builder, but we thought it'd be interesting to add a turn-based element to that. So most city builders obviously, happen over time, and you sort of gain resources over time. Whereas we thought it'd be interesting to have it where you have to be, like spending your money each turn, and then at the end of each turn, there's sort of events that happen in response to the state of the town, which is what comes through that newspaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
think I think a huge inspiration for us doing the newspaper was that a couple of us were very are very avid role playing game players, and so we ended up deciding that we want to take our experiences from those games and kind of put those into kind of like a satirical look on the genre. And
Yeah.
it was nice because we got to kind of flex our writing skills at the same time as building this town builder that's usually more of like a strategy, mechanically based genre of games.
Yeah, so one thing you can see here is the different events in the newspaper, they're not just funny jokes, they also actually have mechanical effects on the game. So one of the primary ones of that is what you can see here with that little bit of green text on the right side, which is basically adventurers will come and like join and leave your town based on, how happy and effective everybody is. And that is the core mechanic of this top bar up here that shows you sort of your impending doom from this, like, the threat of the outside world.
The game's gone through a huge amount of iteration though, because when we started, this was basically a bunch of blocks on a grid, and
Two adventurers.
we eventually started just taking on as much feedback as possible in a very agile manner, and just hammering down on what exactly players found compelling. One big one that wasn't originally a big mechanic was the actual Tetris-y placement of the buildings, but we found that people actually really liked putting down buildings, and they loved the little animation, the pop, and originally you were dragging these buildings out there, and people found that specifically compelling. So we doubled down on that, and that ended up becoming a core feature to kind of shape your town in this very Tetris-like fashion. So you end up with these interesting geometrical shapes.
Yeah, so you can kind of tell that the way the map's designed, we actually have slowly been giving the player less and less space to work with. And the reason we did that is because it's very interesting to see, like, so you can see Ollie's clearing the terrain here. But one thing that is an interesting aspect to the player is like, oh, do I want to spend my money to clear this terrain, or do I want to just try to squeeze as many buildings into this small area as possible to like save that money, which is really important in the early game.
Oh, 2 new quests.
Nice.
I want to build them in first because
Yeah.
my
Actually,
threat here is not
speaking
looking
of,
very good.
Jonathan, would you like to discuss how the quest works?
How the quest.
How this whole system has sort of been built up, over time.
Yeah, look, essentially we thought that, at some point we're like, you know what, the big thing about adventuring games about fantasy worlds is that they have adventurers going on quests, adventuring parties going on quests, and there's a lot to do there, and we didn't actually have that mechanic to begin with, but we had this kind of vague idea that we wanted quests, and we eventually we were thinking of going a lot more complex with it in terms of actually assigning adventures and managing the quests, and we realized it actually was compelling as a trade-off, as you want to balance the adventurers you have in your town to defend the town versus the adventurers that have gone off on a quest to get potential future rewards. And we created this risk reward situation that it came together much better than any of us expected. It to fall in line.
I'm not doing very well.
Yeah, well, as a bit of a strategy for you, try focusing on the cheaper bars. So one thing you can see in this right bar is that the way we've currently calculated a lot of this is that there are these sort of like 3 substats for each of like the main things that kind of like add up. So you have your equipment, weaponry, and magic, which each contribute a third of this full bar. And the way we've sort of currently designed it, which we might want to rework, is that the equipment and food is much cheaper to fill than the rest. So for instance, if you build like a general store to fill that up, that's a much easier way to like gain quick effectiveness rather than try to spend the really expensive buildings like magic and luxury.
Ooh, I got a thing.
What did you get?
Purchase 5 buildings in a single turn.
Well, there you go.
I'm glad to see that achievement system is still working.
If I don't fix things up,
It's very
you might
impressive to
improve it. We'll
see.
how it goes.
Very impressive to see how this game evolved from its very early beginnings to what it is now.
The Alchemist Gin.
Yeah.
yeah,
It-
I was gonna point out in that little tutorial video how much the game already changed in just like the 2 weeks.
That was no 1 week.
Oh, 1 week ago.
That was 1 week.
That was a 1 week.
It wasn't 1 week.
I think I'm about.
But we're here.
Yeah, no, this is it. Good job.
Good job. You've made
Game
it.
of the first iteration. There we go.
This really shows that even if you make a game, you're not good at it.
And that's another aspect to this that we also want to emphasize.
Right.
The concept of this game was supposed to be very difficult and supposed to be very roguelike-y. So there is this concept where you will lose quite a lot until you start learning the mechanics and you start learning how to prioritize and how to sort of like react to this. And in future iterations, something we really want to focus on, and something we've been talking about previously, is like really doubling down on making it so players have to plan ahead a few turns and they have to like make sure they have enough so when new adventurers come, they don't immediately like have all of these new issues that just prop up.
Great.
All right. Believe we have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, you have 5 minutes left.
Open to any questions, just for any like last minute.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. What is the biggest hurdle that you've had to encounter while designing this game?
Ooh.
Coming up with the idea.
Oh yeah, that was a hell of an evening. Actually, no, it was a week. Actually, it was like we had a meeting to begin with, that started with, hey guys, let's make a third-person action game about time loops. We went away, came back with our ideas, and then suddenly we realized we all came back with a completely different game. Like when I say completely different, I mean like some weren't even third person. Some weren't action games, some were strategy games, and we ended up just hearing this idea that we had glazed over originally, which was Ben's dream
Yeah, so
dream game for ages.
Yeah, I actually have a bit of a different, but like different perspective from kind of like how that all played out, because the concept of a fantasy town builder is something that I have like had in my mind for maybe 3 years before this subject started. And it was always kind of like the project that I wanted to work on my own, and kind of like, because it was like very much like my concept that I was really thinking. And when I brought it forward, I was like, hey, this is something that, I've had this concept of. And a big challenge for me was actually letting go of the original concept of what I thought the game was going to be, as other people started contributing these ideas. And the game we have now is so much better in concept and premise and everything to like what I originally thought of. Because you let go of these preconceived notions of like, oh, I've got this perfect idea of something in my head, and learning to like let go of that and realize the reality of making games is so much more iterative, and it's so much more like experimental, and you actually kind of like find the game as you make it. You don't start with a game and then say, oh, here it is. You actually are like almost like carving it away and figuring out what works and doesn't over time. And I think that was a big challenge for me to learn.
Well, the best part of working as a group in this way is that we all came in with different ideas of what we want to do with this. Like, a big thing is we had a couple group members who were working with different kinds of technologies and different kinds of ideas in other projects, and they wanted to try and see how they could implement that. So, for instance, the oddly shaped grid that you're seeing was Jordan Hamlin's idea. I think he's on actually, but
Yeah, hey.
that ended up taking over a lot of what this game was about, and I think that was an incredible mash of ideas there. Dale's environmental stuff ended up being instrumental.
Yeah, like all the day-night cycle and everything. This was all very much, yeah.
And I think it's that clash of ideas, and having a group that is able to accommodate a lot of different ideas coming together and seeing where that goes, really contributed to making this high quality.
Like improv comedy school of yes-anding each other's ideas. We always found like when somebody came forward with like, oh, this is a technology, or this is something that I'm interested in, we put a lot of effort into saying like, yes, this is potentially how we could fit this in. Let's try to play in this space and work it out over time. And that led to like a lot more variation than we probably otherwise would have had.
I mean, the fact is, I don't think any one of us could have pulled this off. It was definitely a combination of the combined knowledge and ideas of the team. And that's the really fun and exciting part of the whole thing.
All right, we just have one question, and then we're gonna have to finish this up. So Leon, in the Discord chat, just asked the question: how much of the game is hard code, and how much of it is data driven?
Most of it is data driven.
Yeah, basically none of this is hard coded. Like the buildings, obviously we've modeled the buildings, but in terms of the like the warping of them, in terms of like how they fit into the grid and stuff like that, that's all data driven. All of the events, we write the events, but the actual way they spawn and the way sort of they all come into the paper, that's all responsive to like the stats in that sidebar. So the amount of adventurers you have and that satisfaction and the amount of threat you have, that all contributes to what shows up in the paper.
Fortunately, Ollie here is a bit of a whiz with building tools for Unity, so we ended up being able to have a great set of editing tools to create these quests and very complex quest chains and outcomes, all authored in, but still it's essentially fully data driven in that respect.
All right, well that's it for Ozymandias. I hope you all enjoy, and if you really want to honestly, this is one of the most polished games that I think I've seen, just out of a small group of people. Just it's actually very impressive, and I would honestly like to play this in my own spare time. So thank you all for jumping in, Ozymandias group. You guys are great, honestly. And we'll be just taking a quick short break, and we'll be switching over to Crystal Mech, which is our next game.